Good afternoon and welcome to the Glendale Housing Authority meeting. Can we have a roll call, please?
Yes. Vice Chair Ajinian,
Here.
Housing Authority members Asadrian,
Here.
Brotman,
Here.
Garpetian,
Here.
Najarian,
Here.
Parazian,
Here.
Chair Kasakian.
Okay. May we have reports, please?
Yes, the agenda for the November 19, 2024 regular meeting of the Glendale Housing Authority was posted on November 14, 2024 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
Okay. And next item?
Approval of minutes of the regular Housing Authority and joint City Council and Housing Authority meetings of November 5th, 2024.
Are there any oral communications?
I will move the minutes. Second.
Roll call?
Vice Chair Ajinian,
Yes.
Housing Authority members Asadrian,
Yes.
Brotman,
Yes.
Garpetian,
Yes.
Najarian,
Yes.
Parazian,
Yes.
Chair Kasakian.
Next item?
Next is oral communication. We do not have any calls or speaker cards.
The business agenda?
There's no business agenda. The following item is authority member and staff comments.
And
No comments from me.
No comments.
No comment.
no comments.
If there are no comments, I'll move to adjourn.
Second.
So,
Adjourn.
move to adjourn?
Yeah, we had a
Or-
motion. and a
Yeah,
second.
okay.
Are we just rolling through? Or, All right. Good afternoon. Welcome to the November 19th special meeting of the Glendale City Council. May we have roll call?
Yes, council members Brotman,
Here.
Garpetian,
Here.
Kasakian, Najarian,
Here.
Mayor Asadrian.
Here. And may we have your report?
The agenda for the Tuesday, November 19, 2024 special public meeting of the City Council was posted on November 14, 2024 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
All right. And what's next?
Next is item 1, community development regarding improvements to the entitlement and permitting process, Phase 2. A motion to note and file the update regarding the entitlement and code review process and provide direction on the next phase of improvements.
All right. Mr. Calvert. Woohoo. A lot of good stuff here.
Hopefully. Good afternoon, Mayor and council members. As you know, over the past couple of years, one of our primary charges in CDD has been to improve the planning entitlement process and the building and safety review process for permits. This has included trying to make things clearer, more understandable to the general public, providing clear direction to our applicants, improve customer service, and just overall removing or reducing timelines. That's been one of the primary elements and focus of the work. With that being said, today we are bringing forward a number of recommendations to investigate further. I will issue kind of a caveat that everything that we have on our list today, you're not necessarily implementing it today. There are a couple things that could be per council's direction. Others we're going to take back, we're going to study, we're going to research, we're going to come back with alternatives for the council to consider. We've already done really kind of 1 or 1.5 phases of improvements, if you will. We started these about a year ago, maybe a little bit more. As we met with stakeholders, we had a third-party consultant come in. Council, you helped direct some of the work plan and some of the items that we would move forward with as we tried to make these improvements. During this time, we've implemented express permits and instant permits for a number of different reviews, things like solar, water heaters, things of that nature, to move them through the process a little faster. One of the challenges we had when we moved to an online permitting system is that we kind of lost that ability to immediately put something in somebody's lap to start reviewing. With the express and instant permits, that helps take that out, that extra couple days delay on what used to be an over-the-counter. So I'd really kind of summarize as that. We brought back some over-the-counter review. We eliminated unnecessary reviews by other divisions and departments. What I mean by that is that if planning's already approved something, fire, GWP, Public Works, building and safety has corrections, but they don't have impacts to any of those other divisions, we are no longer waiting for that group, all the other groups to essentially re-review it when there really have been no changes to impact them. What we found is that it takes a couple weeks sometimes off of our review period because something's not sitting in someone's queue that could take maybe a handful of minutes to clear out. We've begun updating our checklists and bulletins. Part of what we want to do and what you'll hear about today with our pre-application process is expanding on that further. We continue to make fixes to our bugs in Intergov. We knew it'd be a little bit of a bumpy start in the beginning, but I think a lot of it's ironed out, and we're finding ways to optimize this system, optimize how we use this online permitting, and working towards continuous improvements. We made exemptions for geotechnical reports. We are nearing our completion of our mixed-use and multi-development standards. That should be coming early next year. The intent there is to create objective standards, measurable standards, ones that can be readily applied to projects without a lot of discretion, if you will, a lot of subjectivity. The goal here is to create objective standards. We launched our pre-approved ADU program. We have some there online now. We'll see more coming, but we're ahead of the state requirement of January 2025 of having that in place. We've been collaborating with other departments such as GWP. They have removed their final inspection for some elements of new projects that essentially added about 10 days to the process. They've entrusted with our building and safety staff. As Manny Robledo stated, we moved the speed of trust. And his intent was to put that trust with us and be able to make that review on their behalf. We're also making improvements to backflow preventers, backflow devices. We have new information that allows us in our department to evaluate easements and whether or not a project needs to go to GWP in the first place. At a certain point, we were essentially sending everything over to them. And the goal was to try to remove those unnecessary reviews or delays. We also brought a series of code changes. Continuance of nonconformance, essentially replacing like-for-like items, if you will. We expanded some of the administrative design review, cleaned up some confusing language. A good example was in our auto row, our auto retailers had to have parking for their parking, essentially. They had to have parking for their retail inventory, taking out things like that and cleaning those up. From that, we've seen very positive results. If we look at it from the planning side of things, entitlement reviews, that year-over-year change, that first one's actually supposed to be a minus 43%. Administrative exceptions, 47%. Admin use permits, down 60%. Design review, down 40%. When we look at our plan check timelines, same thing. Across the board, we're seeing almost everything come down in pretty significant rates. 40%, 50%, 20%. We do see some, such as fences down there in planning, up about 13%, and they had probably the most modest decrease, if you will, for building and safety. So while we're seeing very positive results, obviously there are more places where we can continue to improve. We're still collecting data, so we still have a relatively limited amount of data as we have not had the system in long enough to be able to collect what we believe would be clean enough data to be able to continue to monitor every timeline for every permit, but we continue to build on that. And our goal is that we can get to a point where we can essentially offer up what we consider to be maybe guaranteed timelines. We know that this is the benchmark we would make for each kind of permit. And as we get more and more data, we get closer and closer to that. During this time, we've also seen the number of applications increase by 9%. So a very positive trend there. We're busier, but we've reduced our timelines. Our number of plan checks has decreased by 17%. Essentially what that means is we're seeing less resubmittals. That means the information that we're providing is clear, hopefully for our applicants. They're providing us a better product in exchange, and we're not seeing so many projects go through so many resubmittals. And hopefully we continue to see these numbers trend down as we check in about every 6 months or so and monitor that. With that being said, while, again, we have seen very positive trends from this first phase, obviously there's still more work that can be done. And what I would consider, what I'm about to go through here, there's about 16 different items. There were 14 in your report. I've added a couple more here at the end that we thought would be very relative to what we're doing now. We can still bring those timelines down. What we're going through, though, is what I would consider to be low-hanging fruit. These are the things that aren't having a significant impact to our code. We're not changing, DRB processes, things of that nature. We have a long list that our consultant helped put us together, that staff helped put together, that our stakeholders helped put together. And from this point on, after this round, we'll see these get more and more complicated. But we saw some more opportunities here to make some quick, easy changes, and hopefully some pretty significant improvements. Again, anything we go through today, we're not asking you to make a final determination on. It's whether or not you would like us to go back, take a look at this, come back with alternatives. At the end of this, I'll have the full list there so we can go by one, gather votes, any additional notes. If there's something in here that you don't see that you are interested in seeing us incorporate here, do keep in mind we do have 16 items, so we don't want to blow that up to, say, 32. But if there are things that are a priority, please let us know, and we can add that into this queue, and we can take a look at that as well. So with that being said, we've heard a lot of comments from council, from the public regarding our fences, walls, regulations. What we would like to do is develop objective standards for these, no longer send those to DRB. If they can meet those criteria, they are not in the setback, they meet the criteria for height, for materials, there is no point in sending that to DRB. Let's take care of that in-house and move that along faster. We do have about, I think it's about 48 cases, if I'm not mistaken, with neighborhood services of fences that are in some sort of violation, fences or walls. It has been brought up before by council to consider essentially an amnesty program, if you will. And maybe that includes a delayed period of time to try to rectify the situation. Maybe this is a discussion that we're going to go into and you would like to make additional changes when we return in terms of what could be allowed for a fence or a wall. So pausing that enforcement, maybe allowing some of these that are on a kind of case-by-case basis to kind of phase in, really kind of a non-conforming status, if you will, or to continue to elongate their process to help correct them. Those don't have to go together. You can choose one and not the other whenever we get to that point at the end. Removing the administrative use permit for alcohol sales in restaurants and the AUP for alcohol sales in banquet halls. We're already doing a CUP for banquet halls. This is just another layer that's on top of it. Obviously, they have to get a license through the county. We have Title V. We have other measures to go ahead and regulate these restaurants, these banquet halls. If there needs to be some sort of penalty or revocation, we've seen that with the county before where we've had to do that with other restaurants. We have other tools and mechanisms, and really this is just one more additional step that adds on more time. We have to publicly notice it. We have a comment period. We have appeal periods. It just adds more time to projects that is not necessary. Really not needing that kind of belt and suspenders approach, if you will. Another proposed improvement, sign refacing. So essentially, if we have a box channel, and let's take across the street, Bank of America, they become a Wells Fargo. They keep that frame there, and they just swap out the Bank of America with a Wells Fargo. No permit needed anymore. It's really, again, just kind of added time for something that is really just a change in the name of the business, and not something we necessarily need to review if they're not changing the actual size of the sign, the shape of the sign, materials of the sign. Council has asked us before to look at minimum unit sizes. This was something that was we were given direction on prior. This has come from a number of different discussions we had on updating the DSP. We've looked at the multifamily and mixed use standards. I've put the numbers in here for the minimum unit size requirements for zones outside of downtown, the multifamily, and then downtown itself. You can pick just look at one of these, both downtown, not downtown, just certain size units. What I would say and why I think there is a little justification to looking at this and exploring this further is that our minimum unit size for outside of downtown, excuse me, is 600 square feet, whether that's a studio apartment or a one bedroom. National average for a studio runs about 450 square feet. So for the sake of the housing element, this could mean we can nab a few extra units in some developments. It could mean that we could get a little more diversity in terms of our unit typology, maybe bring some in that are a little bit lower rate. If you look at something like downtown, that does not mean if we tinker with one of those numbers, you are only going to see studio apartments. If you recall in 2019, when we updated the downtown specific plan and that incentive system, as you move through that, you have to provide a greater mix of 2 and 3 bedroom units. Again, the goal there was to kind of encourage multi-generational households. So you're not going to be necessarily tampering with the mix of units. It's maybe the ability to get a few extra ones in some multifamily projects and just bring another typology to the market, if you will. We would not recommend going down to the level of, say, micro units, 250 square feet. We know that was a trend for a little while. We've seen that in Seattle, San Francisco. We do, as staff, do not think that would necessarily be appropriate here in Glendale. In-ground pools, we'd like to remove that from plan and review entirely. Train building and safety staff to allow them to handle that. That would, again, take out an additional layer of review. This is not something that is often visible from the street. Again, in-ground, it's not raised. It has no particular aesthetic impact. So again, that's more of an internal change. That's one of those things that, you know, council, if you'd like us to do that, we can start doing that immediately. We don't need to come back with an alternative. Basement FAR calculation. The intent of floor area ratio, or FAR, is to be able to control or reduce mass. If you look at downtown, much of our zoning is controlled by FAR, but we allow, or we actually calculate basements as part of that FAR. Basements aren't visible from the street. They typically don't add to the mass of the building. We would like to be able to remove that from the FAR calculation. That will give more flexibility, particularly to single-family homes, in terms of adding space, because this space is not having a visual impact to the surrounding environment. Ministerial parcel maps, given some changes in state law, moving forward with this, with approving it with no conditions or any additional requirements. This, again, is being consistent with state law. We're not seeing, as we discussed recently, a stage 1 design review, a lot of condo or condo conversions, but we would be prepared for that. And as we acknowledge, we will be sending a memo along to council shortly with some strategies, if you will, to hopefully encourage more condo development in the city. Refining our pre-application process. I could best describe this as, our intent here is to get out in front of projects early, give early guidance, early advice, early direction, maybe catch things that are, could be a fatal flaw to the project that needs to be fixed early on. The challenge we have is that our checklist and our requirements really kind of put that up near a 60 or 70% design package. At that point, they've invested so much time, so much money, so much energy, that a lot of times when we find those challenges, we find those fatal flaws, they're more resistant to want to pull back on it. What we would like to do is peel this back, reduce what it is that we're asking for, catch these applications earlier on. That way we're giving that guidance before they've gone too far down the path, they're too far committed to it, and it becomes harder and harder to unravel. And then we do become kind of the department of no at that point. Our philosophy has been to try to get to yes, and the earlier we can get in front and have those conversations, the better we are. It will help those projects get to compliance. It would not apply to every project. I think we would need to go back and take a look at where we utilize it. We don't use it in every project now, excuse me, but we may need to reconsider that as well. We would like to apply a fee to this, though. And the intent behind that is, one, it is occupying staff time. Our pre-application process right now, what we often find in some cases, not necessarily often, is that the back and forth there becomes more of the staff is put in a position of trying to design or solve things for the applicant. And it really becomes a very large time-consuming endeavor. This allows them really to come in early on, understand that we are focused on kind of this initial review, and then taking that, if the project is ready to go forward later on, that fee that would be paid would be applied to the future application. So if they're going to design review, whatever that pre-application fee would be, we would apply to future projects. That also ensures that when people are coming to us, they're coming to us with projects that they actually intend on doing, legitimate projects. We've had many discussions about parking here in City Council. We would like to make a number of updates. There's been a number of changes to state law, get our parking code in compliance. We've also heard the discussion of studying about parking maximums. Right now we use minimums. Sometimes we tend to be overparked because of that. Parking maximums have proven to be rather successful in many cities across the country, and it also provides an opportunity for the market to make that decision how much parking they really need. We know exactly how much we would like to see potentially, and that's where we would set that parking maximum. But then that lets that developer, that proposer, be able to kind of calibrate based on what they believe their needs are. This would require us to do a parking study. We'd have to do a pretty in-depth discussion, come back several times to kind of go through this. It would be a lengthy process, but we do think that with all the changes that have occurred at the state level, this is a good time to do that, just to also get us up to date. Again, these two things are not tethered. If council does not want to pursue studying parking maximums or making changes to even the minimums, you can also just direct us to move forward with updating to be consistent with the state laws. Our concierge service. This is a function of our economic development team. The goal there is to help, they help work as project facilitators, if you will. Their goal is to help different departments, different divisions collaborate, to work more fluidly together. They become kind of the quarterback of the project. Some of them have expertise in building and safety, some expertise in planning, but they are there to kind of corral the logistics of the project, the meetings, the inspections, the review periods, the coordination between different divisions. The one challenge here is that it's really kind of whatever gets thrown at them. right? We know that certain city projects are priorities. Rockhaven is being handled by our concierge team. We know there's certain projects that are priorities to the city that we dedicate this team to, but there's not a lot of structure. And what we would like to do is come up with that structure. First, we would like to consider, and if council would like to, if council provides the direction, is that it's a fee-based service. Along with that fee, you get guaranteed timelines, expedited processing of the application, but typically applicable to major projects. Think some of the big multifamily downtown developments. That this is a service that is being paid for, that white glove service, if you will. But we also believe that a good opportunity here is that programs based on council's direction could benefit certain initiatives that you may have. One example would be having that concierge team and those fees go towards helping out small businesses with their TIs. We can set that by an income or a revenue cap. We can set it by an employment cap. But the goal is to get those businesses to open as quickly as possible, and that we would use this service to assist that. Maybe there are projects related to multifamily, certain projects that meet, minimum unit requirement or unit size, or unit numbers, so that's assisting with the housing element. Or maybe there are certain projects even within single family that could assist in terms of, income, age, things of that nature. We would recommend that this team largely stays within that larger mixed use, commercial, business-friendly kind of approach, if you will, if you are going to add programs. But any input on those, anything that you may have in mind, could be something that we could go and study and apply to this as well. Most importantly, I think that kind of gets our team around a structure, a philosophy, and what they're working towards, not just projects that happen to be given to them by myself, by council, by the city manager, based on any number of variables. But we start to have a criteria and a structure to it. Our EIR contracting process, as you see with many of the projects that come through downtown, some of our mixed-use projects, many of them have to go through an environmental review process. And typically what happens is after they've gone through stage 1 review, we issue an RFP. We spend about 5 or 6 months writing, issuing, and then selecting a firm. It causes significant delays. We believe that being that we always hear from the same 3 firms every time, that we could either maintain those 3 on call and we just go and get proposals for them every time a project comes up, not write an RFP, not put that out for call, or we could do a one-time RFP to have essentially these firms on call. We could open it up every couple of years if there are new businesses, smaller businesses, minority businesses that are interested, but we believe this would save a lot of time. We've seen this on average, it's 3 to 5 months. We've seen it add upwards of 6 to 8 months on some projects, though, just going through that process. Again, write an RFP, release the RFP, select them, as we came to council recently for one, and then have to go through the contract negotiation and scope of work process. We think this would save a lot of time. Low impact development. We have been talking with our partners up in Public Works. There's been also some staff changes and movement between the 2 departments. And we believe that the low impact development review should move down from Public Works down to CDD. This is something that we have discussed with them. Essentially, it's the idea of consolidating that review, less departmental coordination. It all stays right there in-house. We would need to add a staff member from that. As you know, during the budget process, we did put a number of positions up on the shelf. We would like to be able to bring one of those back down to address LID and the work that goes along with that. But again, being able to keep all of that right there in-house and not have to work between departments and us juggling our calendars and our schedules with the work that they may have as well. We would also like to explore the structure of the divisions themselves. How can we essentially create a group that is easier to understand by the general public? For example, most people aren't going to understand the difference between planning and plan check. There are obviously different functions. We know it. Anybody who's a frequent flyer here knows the difference, but not everyone does. And also from a customer service perspective, that our building and safety team and our planning teams and maybe even our concierge teams are all operating as one group. If someone calls us up, they don't say it's with building and safety, they don't say it's with planning. We would like to explore the idea of combining these all together, potentially in a group like development services, so their function is one team, their customer service facing as one team, and they coordinate in that manner as well. One of the things that I did not have included in the report that added in here is the idea of fast-track tenant improvements. Essentially, if you do not have mechanical, if you do not have fire, and you are not changing the outside of the building, that we can guarantee, say, a 5-day turnaround. Again, this is with the intent and the effort of getting businesses open faster, filling some of our vacant spaces faster, but recognizing that some of these projects are not that complicated, and sometimes they get stuck in that queue behind something much larger. And how do we get that moving along and moving faster? Our cashiering functions, we've had some discussions with both Treasury and Finance. To be frank, we are the only facility, if I'm not mistaken, in this city who handles cash, handles checks, handles money, that has no bulletproof glass. We have no security guard, and essentially we're asking a staff member to walk across our courtyard at some point in the day and deliver this to our Treasury and Finance teams. We would like to move this out. During our discussions, essentially it would require us to have 2 staff members, hourly staff members or full-time, dedicated for what would equate to 5 hours of work per week. You have asked me to make this group more efficient. We do not see that as the most efficient solution. We would like to get that moved out of our group. Essentially, we cannot have our building and safety team work on that because there's a conflict of interest with the projects. So therefore, I have to have staff members on call who can do that 1 hour of work at the end of every day to process, finalize, and then deliver this. We have to have somebody on backup. Right now, we are actually missing a staff member, and we have somebody who I would argue is far too senior to be working on this work, who's being taken out of pocket of other projects they need to be working on. We are not finance people. We are not money people. We are permits. We're economic development. We're housing. This is something that really kind of burdens, weighs us down, and then also has us have to carry additional staff that could be doing other things. As you'll hear later on this afternoon, having hourlies maybe assist in the work that we have with neighborhood services. We just don't see that as the most efficient use of our team. And the last thing we added in there that was not included in the report, allowing sister framing for rehab or modifications to home to not count as new construction. What I mean by that is we have one particular case I'll use as an example. They're attempting to raise the height of the roof. Because the sister framing, which essentially is adding on to the existing structure, counts as new construction, he cannot go in, the applicant cannot go in under say a renovation, rehabilitation addition. It has to count as new construction. Now he's got to go through DRB, he's got to go through higher permit fees. This is something that we do not see as consequential. We would put limits on this, right? Because otherwise we could see places where applicants could use this as a means to get around other regulations. We would not recommend doing this for anything that increases floor area ratio or maybe increases it up to a certain amount. That way we don't get all new bedrooms added onto a house. But maybe somebody can raise their roof if it's within the regulations. Maybe somebody could add a few feet to a bedroom, a bathroom, something like that. We would need to look at that a little more carefully. Again, we don't want that to get abused by any means, but we do think that that's kind of an unfair position for some of our applicants to be in. So those are the 16 items. Quick next steps before we go into the list and council can give their feedback. We would leave here today and develop alternatives, and pretty much all of these, with the exception of a handful of items that can go into place immediately. We would come back for final direction on those items. In the case of code changes, we still have to present that to Planning Commission, and we still have to come back to council again. But in between all of that, we would come back to council one more time in batches, much like we did last time with our process improvements, and make sure that we were on the right track and for council to give feedback on alternatives. Again, some of the non-code changes, we can start implementation immediately if council directs us to move forward with those. So with that being said, that concludes my presentation. I will leave this list up so as we walk through, I can gather your feedback. And again, if there's anything else you would like to add to this queue, please feel free to give us that direction.
Thank you, Mr. Calvert. I believe we have one speaker, so I'm going to take that first, and then we can go into council questions and comments.
Mayor Asatrian, we actually have 2 speakers. Our first speaker is Ellen Durham. You have 3 minutes.
Afternoon, Mayor Asatrian, council members. Thank you for letting me speak. I'm Alan Durham. I have a comment on minimum unit sizes. I can see where it would make sense, perhaps outside the downtown specific plan, to separate the minimum unit size for studios versus 1 bedroom. But other than that, I am not in favor of further reducing any of the other minimum sizes. I've seen instances where those minimum unit sizes get reduced as concessions and density bonus programs already in projects. And, you know, Glendale definitely needs more housing, needs more affordable housing, but it's important to remember it should be quality, livable housing, and certainly no micro units. I've always thought units of 250 square feet were a bad idea. And on freestanding walls and fences, I'm not in favor of amnesty for the 48 current violations. I think it sets a bad precedent. I'm not sure exactly where the city's going on fence and wall ordinances, but I'm not in favor of the amnesty. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next public comment is caller Shane Lee. Shane, you're on air. You have 3 minutes.
Hey, can everyone hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Perfect. My name is Shane Lee. I'm with Glendale YIMBY. I adore all of these proposed improvements by the community development team. Reducing the minimum unit size is amazing and will allow more diverse unit typology and increase the overall supply of units. Excuse me. There are thousands of young college graduates in Glendale, such as myself, who do not need a large condo, and we are not yet in a period of life where we want large units to raise families. We just need a place of our own so we can be independent and begin our adult lives without having to live with family or friends. So I fully agree with reducing the minimum unit size. Also, parking mandates are regressive, they are outdated, and they do contribute to housing scarcity. Excuse me. And they should be eliminated entirely or replaced with the parking maximums, as Mr. Calvert mentioned. More housing is better for everyone, and we should let the market decide how large a unit is. And again, a lot of people do not need, nor do they want, or in my case, they cannot afford a unit larger than 400 square feet. So I fully agree with that aspect of the proposed community development. In addition, I also fully agree with everything Mr. Calvert mentioned about streamlining. I mean, he talked about just simple stuff like the signage for businesses, you know, reducing staff time for approving pools, like all of these little, items here and there that just take up staff time. 100%, you should streamline it as much as possible. These are very smart people in the community development department. We should let them do their jobs and reduce any unnecessary, bureaucratic work. So I fully agree with those proposed developments as well. And I just want to reiterate how awesome it would be. I know you don't want micro units, but 400 square feet should absolutely be the minimum unit size. Those places, units like that exist in San Francisco and Seattle, as Mr. Calvert mentioned, and they would it would immediately create hundreds of more units in certain projects. It would allow a lot more projects to pencil out. It would allow more use of what's it called, the density bonus. And I can't imagine any person who would be against this. So reducing unit sizes is great, and reducing parking minimums or making them parking minimums is also great. Let's build some more housing so that more people can live in Glendale, which I think is the greatest city in the world. Thank you.
Thank you. And that is all.
All right. Mr. Calvert, do you have recommendations on how you want me to structure this? Do you want to take questions first, or do you want to do you think it'd be better if we went?
I would say if you have questions, probably be a good time. If you have other things you would like to throw into this for a quick discussion, then we could go through the list in terms of votes, and if there's any other notes you want to add on to it. Like I said, some of these things don't require you to take both parts of it. You can just choose to do one.
Okay, let's take questions first. Who has questions?
I'm ready to go through the list. I don't have questions.
You have questions?
I have questions, but when I go through the list, then we can address them. I don't have too many questions. I have comments. So maybe we can go through the list one by one. Each of us can go through the list, and then
Okay.
they can take notes.
So I recognize we're talking about phase 2 now. If I may just address a couple of things that were part of phase 1 that you highlighted that I think we need to bring some attention to, and then we can go through each of the blocks. As part of your phase 1, or I think when we started this process, I handed over a very long list of things that some of these things are included in there, and some are not. I'm trying to understand how you're picking and choosing how you bring these buckets. If you can kind of, are these things that you feel like we can do faster and so therefore it's in this bucket versus others? I know it was a very long list, so I'm not expecting that it's all coming at the same time.
I think it's a kind of a combination of factors. There are things that we could make immediate impacts with. Like, we saw that with the last round, that produced some pretty immediate results. As I kind of acknowledged earlier, this is kind of the low-hanging fruit. After this, when we get into phase 3, 4, 5, however many we do here, it's going to become harder and harder to do from the perspective we're going to have to make harder decisions. These are going to be things about more significant code changes potentially. If there are processes that we want to change that are public-facing. We saw that list of items that we were given from the consultant, and there's some pretty big things in there. What we'd like to do is get through what I would call the easy stuff, which is producing results for us, and then we can start working on those harder things. Because as we saw, I think the very first time we came with a list of items, there was one item in there that caused a little bit of concern from the public. We ended up pulling back on it, and there was that discussion of doing a lot of public engagement. These are the things that we're not going to have to spend a lot of time doing that because they're not impactful necessarily to the public. Parking may be an exception to that. But those are going to have a lot more layers, a lot more elements that are going to have to go through in terms of public facing than what we have here. Knock out the easy stuff and then get to the more difficult.
Okay. As part of your phase 1, you mentioned the checklists, and then I know that you have the pre-application in phase 2. When I had brought forth the concept of the checklist, it was also part of an internal process for staffing, for there to be accountability. What we've seen time and again has been this concept of, businesses or residents come and then, staff says, these are the things you need to do. And then when they submit those, then it's like, okay, well, also this and also that and also that. So I don't know when you're planning to bring that back. And I'm not looking for data. I'm looking for, here are some measures we're putting in place internally. And it's not, I think, any of our jobs to tell you how to run your office and your staff, but looking at the accountability measures that you're putting in place for that not to take place and how you're incorporating that into any checklist and pre-approval or process that you guys come up with internally. I think one of the examples I had noted about 1.5 years ago was the system of the city of Los Angeles had, where they meet every Thursday, 40 hours of work is handed to each of the staffers, and then you're able to tell what kind of project should require a certain amount of time for review. And then, if anybody's not meeting those deadlines or whatever it is that you gave them for the week, then, there's an explanation and accountability of why someone's able to do something in 30 minutes and another staff member is not. So I'm interested to hear about that. And then I know that part of last time we had some sort of conversation was that you were going to be bringing a report back for staffing, additional staffing. I think the council as a whole has made this area a priority. I recognize that it's now coming as part of the larger action plan, but I think whether it was yours or whether it was PD's, if it's easier to just bring the staffing, then I'd rather have us see the staffing needs and not wait for larger reports to be produced to give you the help you need in order to meet the demands that we're placing on you.
See if I can remember all of that. Checklist is always, that's going to be an ongoing thing for us, the bulletins and checklists. The bulletins help provide clarification either to the public, sometimes to our own internal staff. The checklists themselves, that's something as we continue to move through, we're always going to be updating various handouts and checklists. So we don't have a precise timeline on when all of those would be overhauled. Some of these change because maybe some rules have changed, some regulations have changed, but it's also a matter of being able to get to those and update. In terms of kind of the tracking, the accountability, and the hours, we're still collecting data as we're going through this process with this new system. I would like to be able to get us to a point when we come back maybe next spring, next summer, we start discussing the possibility of a phase 3 is that idea has been mentioned here at council. If there's certain kind of set timelines things of that nature, and then also making sure that our staff are meeting that. In terms of, actually, I'll go back to the checklist portion about, things being looked at from a de novo perspective every time they come in, and then it's that, and this, and then this, and then this. What I am hoping is that, one, I haven't heard that complaint myself from the general public as nearly as often, but I think it's also reflected in the fact that our number of rechecks, or the total number of plan checks, has gone down. That tells us we are getting less submittals in general. We have more applications, but there are less submittals because people aren't having to come back quite as many times. So I think we can see a positive trend in that regard in terms of being able to track in that nature. Those are things we're still going to have to develop internally. To the last point about staffing and action plan, I would love to rush an item to council on December 3rd if I wouldn't upset Rubik on a staffing request, but I don't think I can do that without the action plan. That explains, that justifies, that tells us what it is that we would need in the first place. And also, looking at our own internal data, if we're trying to get timelines down to a certain point, we need to be able to look at all of that information and look at that in kind of totality. I would not want to come here. I don't think it would be responsible of us to come in and arbitrarily ask for positions without knowing exactly what it is that we're going to get for that. And that action plan is going to tell us that, and that data is going to tell us that. So I don't think we can really separate those two things.
Okay. All right, thanks. Okay, who wants to go first?
I'm ready,
Go.
if you want me to.
Rock
Okay.
on.
Well, I like the direction of this, and I'm pretty much a yes to go ahead on everything with just maybe a few caveats or a few clarifications on 4 items. So if I don't, any of the ones I don't mention, I'm perfectly comfortable with you going ahead and doing what you suggest. The 4 items are, starting with the fences, the amnesty. I'm a little hesitant about, doing any kind of amnesty that would encourage people to, in future, proceed with projects without getting permits. But I'd like to know what these 48 cases are, and maybe in some cases, there's a simple fix where they can get the permit. So if we can get people permitted, if these are things that we would otherwise would have permitted, and we can just get the people permitted and move on and not make it, some terrible crime, then that's okay. I think that's okay, because we do that normally. If somebody didn't get a permit, we maybe charge a little bit more, like double the permit fee, but we get them the permit and move on, right?
We typically try to not be punitive in those regards unless there's a
It's really
threat to
egregious.
health, life,
Yeah.
safety, structure, things like that. But as long as we can see demonstrated forward progression, we'll extend cases. We'll continue to work with them. We know
Yeah.
some of these aren't the easiest fix. What I would say in terms of if there's a concern about that system being abused going forward, we wouldn't apply any amnesty to anything. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, today you said start it. We wouldn't apply that to anything after today. That would only be in cases that we have previously. I would say that 43, 48 cases, I would probably say that's an underestimate of how many are actually out there. We are complaint-based. I could probably name another 20 I know that are out there that have not been reported, that you just drive by and see, right? So I think it's probably a much higher number. I don't know how high. It's not a clear kind of cut and dry how the amnesty would work, right? We want to look at the age of it, how egregious is the issue, things of that nature, if it was something you wanted to entertain. But again, that's just us trying to work with
Yeah,
customers.
I'm open to us looking at it. I think we should look at it, see what the different buckets of violations are, and we can make a decision later on that. No chain link fences, though.
No.
I don't want to start giving amnesties to.
No, we would come back with all the standards for materials. Much of it would stay the same. It would just be us putting something in there as an objective requirement.
Okay, so that's that. On minimum unit size, I'm okay eliminating it, because I think the market will dictate a minimum unit size. People aren't going to build things that they can't either lease out or sell. And I don't think banks will finance things if there's not a market study that says there's a demand for it. So I'd be comfortable getting rid of it if we want to kind of find a lower number. My reference is always the junior ADU I have, which is 330 square feet. I had a young guy living in there for 2 years. He was very happy because I was able to offer a low rent. It was perfect. It was walking distance to Glendale College. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. So, you know, you could take it down to maybe 300, 350 square feet or something like that. I'd be okay with that. But I do think we should either lower it or eliminate it. Parking minimums, I definitely think we should remove minimums. Again, let the market dictate what is needed. People are not going to be building things with no parking. They just won't get it financed, and you know, they wouldn't do it. But let's do that. As for maximums, I'm interested in it because I've read about it. I don't really know how it would work, how we would set that, and what are the best practices out there, who's doing what. So I would like to learn more about it, but I'm going to just kind of keep neutral on whether I think we really should do that. I just want to know more about it. I do recognize there was a design review that came through last week, right? And they had quite a bit of parking. And, you know, I'd like to understand why they wanted so much parking. And maybe there's a legitimate reason. Maybe they can, you know, build parking in a location because it's cheap since they're already doing it. And they can then lease that out to maybe neighboring, you know, businesses, or maybe there's some model there. So I don't want to get too restrictive on that. And then the last one, the concierge service. Yeah, I think we should look at that and think about it as a cost. And if we want to subsidize it like we subsidize some of our other fees, let's kind of go into it with that mindset. I do see a role for subsidizing for small business. And I do see a role for subsidizing for ownership projects. Since, you know, I've heard around the dais where, you know, we have a lot of rental properties, and we're just not seeing ownership projects get developed, and we'd like to see more of that if there's any way we can encourage it. So I'd be open to doing that. And apart from that, I'm going to trust that moving low impact development from one department to another, the city manager is okay with that, and we're not ruffling anybody's feathers. So I'm just going to assume that since you've presented it. But everything else, I think, yeah, go ahead and do it as far as I'm concerned.
I will say that me and Mr. Hernandez have met, discussed, and planned this out. So he's not going to get surprised later on today.
Yeah, I assume that. So that's basically it. Everything looks good.
Great. Would like to go next?
I'll go next.
Okay.
Okay. Fences and walls, I do not want amnesty on that. I do support strong objective criteria so that it doesn't have to go to DRB if someone does ask for a permit. The AUP I'm okay with. Signs, I just want to make sure that they're not eliminating a Bank of America sign and putting in some flashing, gaudy, other type of sign. I mean, it's not just the framing that I'm concerned with. I think when Bank of America got its permit, there were certain criteria on that. I don't want that to be eliminated, so.
It's still a static face.
Some crazy sign.
It's still a static face sign. In fact, you'll probably be getting a memo later today on an update on digital sign and our approach to that later on, but it would just be replacing one face for another.
But they could put any kind of face they want. Like girls, 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 or flashing non.
Well, it has to be relative to the
digital.
Business.
Well,
It cannot be
non-digital.
animated, so it can't
Talking about
move.
on-site.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
So it
on-site
can't
sign, the
move.
business, whatever the business is, that's what it's for.
No, I understand, but there's signs, there's tasteful business signs, and there's distasteful business signs. So that's the only caveat I have on that. You know, I don't want something crazy to go in where an otherwise modest sign was once. Minimum unit size, I think we need to keep minimum units. I don't want small units. I think it destroys the fabric of the community by having too many small units where, you know, it turns into like a flop house kind of thing where you just have a place to rest your head. In-ground pools, I'm okay with that. The basement FAR, okay. Parcel maps, I'm okay. Pre-application, I'm okay. Parking requirements, I think we're putting a lot of, there's one thing to let the free market handle it. The libertarian in me says that, just let it be done. But I think there are some abuses that could occur. So I'm kind of torn on that one at this moment. Concierge service, I'm fine with that. EIR, I want to make sure that there's some, that we don't lock into certain consultants that are too one way or the other. Maybe give the applicant, like you do with a judge, when you get assigned to a case, you can challenge that judge and just get a reshuffle and get a new group, a new consultant group. Yeah, I've been thinking about that one too lately. The low impact development, I'm fine. Department structure, I'm fine. Fast track, cashiering, everything else I'm fine. Just those three were of note.
Councilmember DeJarn, if I can ask, with the EIR, are you saying to rotate out? Or are you asking that the developer, the applicant has a
Let's say there's a
selection,
consultant
or-
that has a very, that the applicant feels has a bias towards whether it's the individual, whether it's the type of construction, whether it's the location of the project. The applicant should be given a chance to say, I want to reshuffle and get a new consultant from the list. Not that they pick the consultant, but the one that they were assigned to. Explain it, Mike.
I would say really
You know
quick.
what I mean? It's like when you won 70.6 a judge, you get a new shot. You don't dictate who the judge is, but the one that you're getting, because the EIR is critical, is determinative of the success or failure of an issue. If the applicant feels for some reason, and I don't know the EIR, I don't have any friends in the EIR world, but feels that this one EIR consultant is not going to do a fair review, even before the review starts, that they should be able to say, I'd like to have a reshuffle and a reassignment. Anyway, that's my thought. We're not here to decide it today, but that's just something I have in mind.
We can
When
come
I
back with a couple
describe it,
options.
that's what I'm thinking about. And that's all I have.
I would add just a couple of things, just for your own information, that we wouldn't just assign on a rotational basis. We essentially, if we had 3 or 5, whoever's on deck, we would ask them all for proposals. And then much like we do any other contract, we would choose the best proposal out of that. I would say in terms of making sure they're objective, from Mr. Garcia's office, Ms. Van Meiden does an excellent job of helping us with that. But we can also go and kind of reshuffle that group every couple of years or something, so the more could be in that pool. But we will come back with a couple options to address that.
I would just add, Councilmember Najarian, the EIRs ultimately have to reflect the independent judgment of the agency, meaning of the city. And as Mr. Calvert noted, both his staff and my staff are usually involved in those. When we bring back those options, one option might be just to sort of have a rating experience from the applicant after we've gone through that process, so we know going forward in the future that maybe that's something we need to look for in the next time we select a consultant, rather than as an alternative to giving the applicant the option to say no to this particular vendor. But those are things we'll look at. But again, just to remind you that ultimately that EIR reflect the independent judgment of whoever the decision maker is, which is usually the council, but with a lot of input from CDD as well as from legal.
All right, we can just leave it. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Garpetian, do you mind doing going through the same method? Like if you're,
I have a couple of other comments before I go to.
do you want to, do you mind going through the items first and then?
Sure, no problem.
And then
Yeah, I
add
can
whatever
do that.
else you have?
No problem.
Okay.
As far as improvements thus far, where am I? Am I at the right spot? Yes. Collaboration with GWP for removal of final inspections. Within that, can we also talk about or look into that meter spotting issue? Because when you build an, I don't know, an ADU or a new development, the GWP has to come in and kind of spot where your meter is going to be. And also they have to take a look at your power supply in the back of your property or what have you, see if there's enough power or not. Sometimes that takes a very long time and people don't know about it. So when they get their approvals and then they want to move forward, they say, no, you need to have, you need to have this, your meter spotted, or also to see if you have any, enough power over there or not. And also I'd like to explain to me the continuance of non-conformance. What can you explain that to me?
Essentially anything that's legal non-conforming. The rules changed. Maybe it's a deck that's not allowed to be as large as it is. As long as they replace it like for like. Things get old, right? Materials start to fail, structure starts to fail. As long as they replace that non-conforming like for like, same size, same material, same color, we'll allow it to continue. What we've seen in some cases, if there's something non-conforming and say you want to go make a change somewhere else in your house, you'd have to go back and fix that as well. So we also allowed some leeway for that. There was an example a couple years ago, somebody wanted to add like a pantry to their kitchen. Turns out that their attached garage was non-conforming. They were gonna have to update their garage in order to be able to do that because they were out of compliance. So we kind of removed that out of the picture. And again, being able to replace things.
Okay. As far as the fences go, I don't know what our regulations are, but I remember when the fence on my property line was damaged, I wanted to replace it. I had to get a survey and make sure that I have the same kind of fence that I had in the, prior to that. So which was a wood fence. So recently I've seen, I don't want to just single out some properties, but there is one, it's a large property on a hillside. You can see it from the freeway. It's a very long fence around the property, and it's the white vinyl fence. And it just jumps at you when you drive by. So some of the material, I don't know if you have it in your code or not. Maybe that's something we need to look into if it's on a hillside or what have you. Maybe even if it's a vinyl one, it has to be a color that matches the nature a little bit more, maybe a brown one or a greenish one or what have you, or a wood fence that, it blends within the hillside. Some of them are fine, but because you don't see it's in the back of the property, but the ones that it's really visible from the public right of way, it doesn't, it doesn't look good. As far as the AUPs, I'm okay with that. Minimum unit size, I'm not okay with reducing the minimum unit size currently with the state's bonus density projects, and I didn't know this, and I was questioning some of the projects that was coming forward, and you mentioned that they can stack up the both bonus projects together, maybe an SB 1818 and the other one, and get almost 100% more density to what they can legally build. Currently, if their lot is not large enough, they may not be able to build 100% to that density bonus. But if the unit sizes are a lot smaller, about 300 square feet or so, they could. I lived in a unit of 350 square feet when I was backpacking in Europe. They had this saying. They said the unit is so small you have to go outside to change your mind. So it's not a good quality of life. Maybe it's temporary, maybe it's okay, but in general, I don't think we need to reduce the unit size. In-ground pools, I'm okay with it. As far as the basement and FAR goes, are you talking about new developments to have a basement?
Correct.
So if I want to build a house, I can dig a basement and build a unit down there, for example, maybe a one-bedroom apartment or what have you, and then build my house on top of it.
Most likely not. You would not be able to get the ventilation in the windows. It would be visible for the public. We're talking about fully submerged, or whatever criteria we'll develop and come back and discuss. Maybe it's 2/3, 3/4. But you would not be able to get enough exit ventilation, lighting, windows if you were
If it's a
that far
living
submerged.
quarter.
Yeah. The idea here is that as a separate unit, it wouldn't be able to. The idea here would be is anything that is essentially fully submerged and not visible from the street. We'll come back with some options that can reflect that, some diagrams and graphics so
We
you can
need to
see.
be a little
Yeah.
bit careful on that because you may call it a game room and it's 2,000 square feet under your house, but it could be a 2-bedroom unit in the future, and you add to everything else that came with state mandates with ADUs and JADUs and living quarters and everything else, and SB9s and SB10s. So we need to be very, very careful, and has to have a unit size. Like ADUs have a maximum size. This have to have the same kind of. I'm not really in favor of it, but I'm willing to look at it. Pre-application, we find the pre-application process. I think this pre-application, we talked about it, some of the smaller projects, if it's a garage or a bedroom or what have you, I think they need to just go directly in submitting applications. Sometimes these pre-applications, by the time you submit your project and someone is assigned to it, it takes a month, month and a half sometimes. And it takes 3-4 months to get your pre-application in place. Then you have to, after that is done, then you have to submit your application and go another 2 or 3 months to get your application approved. So it takes a lot longer. So for smaller projects, I don't think we need to have a pre-application. And what do you mean by credit for pre-application would apply for future permits? What is that? What does that mean?
If, for sake of argument, let's say we charge $500 for the pre-application process, we would apply that to their next permit as they move through the system.
As far as parkings and parking maximums, I'm not in favor of it. I think that we're going a full circle. In 50s, 60s, and 70s, and early 80s, the parking requirements were a lot lower than what it is today. And look what's going on in South Glendale. They built 10 units, 1 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms with 6 parking spaces. You come home, I lived on Jackson for a long time. It was like a huge challenge every day coming back home because our unit had only 1 parking. We had 1 parking with only 1 parking, and we had 3 cars. So going around the block every day, even in South Glendale, we see that effect today. And even in residential neighborhoods, when we built our house, we had 2 drivers. Now we have 5. And most of my neighbors, their kids are driving too. So in our streets, maybe there are 20 more drivers than 8 years ago, 5 years ago. And as far as TIs for small businesses, is this like a subsidy for them?
It potentially could be. It could be fee-based. We were trying to recommend something that we thought would help small businesses. So if we created a fee-based system for the concierge service, that could also help, in a way, subsidize and support them assisting the small businesses.
Okay. Okay.
Again, it would still require a lot of study, and I think Councilmember Brotman's perspective, we could also look at the multifamily ownership. We could ensure that they got to see that through the process too.
Okay. As far as the EIR and contracting goes, I know a few years ago we changed the rules that the developer has to pay for it, and city will decide who the consultant will be. And I think what I hear from Councilman Najarian is for the developer to say, I don't want this one, go to the next one, not knowing who the next one will be. Am I correct?
That was my suggestion, but I wasn't exactly clear on how it would be working with an RFP, like a mini RFP. Right, you have a pool of applicants,
We would basically be
pool of
asking for a
firms.
proposal, yeah.
but anyway, I don't want to
Okay.
get into it now, but
All
that's
right.
what I was thinking.
And can you give me an example of low-impact development?
It's part of the review process. Essentially, we apply it to every project. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, state law requires that anything multifamily mixed use That review by code will actually, if we make this change, we'll actually have to come back later on because in our code, it's actually handled by Public Works.
Like what kind of a project is a low impact?
A low impact development essentially is looking at any project that impacts to the site itself. Aura could probably answer this a little bit better, but drainage, impervious surface, looking at all of those different factors. There's certain state requirements that go into this that we have to report back every year. And it can be a time-consuming manner, essentially, but it also, there's a disconnect in that review between us and then Public Works, because we have to hand that off and then fit into their calendar schedules.
Councilmember Garpetian, Mr. Calvert's correct. It's essentially a program to manage stormwater runoff into a green infrastructure.
Okay, I'm okay with that. Thank you for that. Fast track tenant improvements. Can we, within that process, look at the PRCs and how we're issuing? I know we kind of changed the rules a little bit to issue them sooner than later, but I think there are still some issues that needs to be buttoned up. Cashiering, removing it from CDD, where do you suggest to remove it to?
That would move over to Treasury, Councilmember.
So if I want to come in and pay for my development or permit fees when ARA approved it, where do I go to?
It would
To
be
pay.
over at Treasury. We had a discussion before about putting in kiosks. We were going to talk with GWP and partner with them, but those are not going to be utilized anymore, so it has to be taken over to that facility. Again, with our staff, they are responsible for carrying that across the courtyard, whether it's cash, whether it's checks, whatever it may be. And I will say that from my own perspective, and I know from some of my own staff's perspective, again, we have no security in that space. Until noon, when we lock those doors and building safety side, there's no security. And there's a lack of comfort, if you will, to be able to take that in and be responsible for that when that's not most of that staff's primary responsibility.
Okay, I know GWP takes checks and cashes and everything, and they have all the glass.
They have
and
a secure
everything.
facility
So
and
maybe
everything, yeah.
that's something that we can look into.
We thought about that, but honestly, I think the cost alone would be, we are working on a remodel of that side of the building, but I think that would be rather cost prohibitive.
Okay. And sister framing, my understanding was if you have a building and some of the studs are not good, and you put a stud right next to it, and they call it the sister framing.
Correct.
But you asked, you talked about maybe a small addition or what have you. How would that be a sister framing?
It most likely wouldn't. I kind of bring that up because we want to look at a number of different possible scenarios. We're going to need to look at this from all angles because we don't want to end up in a spot where we inadvertently allowed for additions to occur that expanded FAR, or maybe didn't go through the proper channels it really should have gone through. So that may not be the case, but we'll see.
Okay.
If I can ask one clarifying point, Councilmember Garpetian, going back to fences and walls, you said yes to the objective standards. Did you want to explore the amnesty element of it at all, or?
I don't know about amnesty, like there are code violations and they want to look the other way, or what does that amnesty mean?
And I think that's something we need to define. We need to go back, and I think to Councilmember Brotman's point, look at what these violations are, if there's a way to phase them in, or maybe they help inform the changes that we need to make to the code itself. Maybe we learn some things from this. So again, not committing to it, but we can come back with
Yeah, that's
information.
fine, when you come back. And I have a couple of other comments to make. I know that we have the issue of planners, finding jobs, going to other cities, and we have to hire new planners and training them, and by the time they get used to our system takes time. Am I correct or am I wrong? Okay, sorry about that. So I think what we need to do is, from the beginning, when we have new hires, to train them to interpret the code the same way as everyone else, because the code is kind of black and white, and depends how you interpret it in many situations. Also, when the plans come in and you give directions or corrections, maybe twice, but not several times, because people get frustrated. Sometimes I understand they don't do the whole thing. You give them 5 items, they do only 3, bring it back, and 2 are left. But in general, as far as our end goes, to do only not make too many corrections at too many times, because every time they bring the plans back, the city has 30 days to respond, and that's what prolongs sometimes some of these plans. And also try not to, we have to, because we're talking about expediting the process, not changing the planners on a project is important, especially the larger projects, because the new planner that takes that plan doesn't know what the other one did, so they have to go through it again. And when we submit the plans online, any project that's submitted, the assignment part is important. I don't know how long does it take to assign a planner to it, but I think that's important too. I understand it's very challenging. We have so many projects come at the same time. That's another avenue that we have to look at and see how can we expedite that part. Returning phone calls. Every time somebody leaves a message, the message says, the answering service says, I have 72 hours to call you back. But if I call you on a Wednesday, that 72 hours falls into Monday, basically. And Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, all these phone calls piles up on that planner, and Monday, there's no way that they can return all the phone calls. Maybe every morning they can come in and return the phone calls that they had from the day or two before, if possible, and take that load off. What else? I think one or two more items. Some of the ADUs or smaller projects that the design is not going to be changed much. I know that we passed a law, or we allow the applicants to submit their design and at the same time submit their plans for plan check, taking the risk if something changes, they have to make corrections. I think we need to be very clear with the applicants from the beginning when they submit it, so they know they have that option. Many people do not know that.
Yeah,
I know that you're doing your best, because you can't, teach everything at the same time for every application. But if there is a way to notify them that, look, you can also submit your plan check plans, basically for plan check. And the last one is the timeline for ADU approvals. What is the timeline? I mean, when you look at the state law, it says within 60 days you have to have your permits, but is it, am I correct or am I wrong on that?
Correct. And on average, I believe building and safety runs at about 23 days, if I'm not mistaken, and planning's operating about 27, 29. We've been well below it. We've run into some challenges when coordinating with some other departments where they are inching into 60, 70 days. Those are things that we're trying to reconcile here with some of this process improvement and some of the others in the future.
Basically, our process is that within 60 days, you should be able to, if you submit everything correctly. I know sometimes people bring half the material that's needed and they expect it done, but if it's a complete application, it could be 60 to 90 days. Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Okay. So I'm going to go through each one for me, and then what I'd like to do is then have you, I've been taking notes as each council member has made comments for us to see where there's a consensus on, or there's at least 3 votes for. For those that don't have, if it's going to be like a 2-2 split, for us to have the next time you bring items, if there's no movement on either one of the council members here today, then for that to be part of the next bucket that you bring back, and when Councilmember Kasakian's also here, so his input's in there. Just as a point to everyone, there's a water board meeting taking place, and that is why Councilmember Kasakian was not able to join. And I think just as a point of reference to staff moving forward, taking into account the other meetings that are taking place, especially when there's heavy items coming up, for us to coordinate to make sure that we have. I only learned about this right before the meeting, so I was not aware. So all right. With that said, the fences and walls, I'd like to add hedges to the list, and I specifically remember this topic actually came up when there was a resident that came who lives on a corner lot. Their kids run out, had asked for hedges. And I think that's where the conversation initially started for the fences and us looking into this. The sign so whatever I don't mention, I'm okay with, okay? Sign refacing, there was an incident that was brought to my attention with the laundromat on Pacific and Stalker where the business was just trying to change the signage or upgrade the signage and ended up having to cough up a lot of money to be by code or whatnot for us to make sure that just because someone's trying to change a sign and they had a really old sign that doesn't end up costing our small business like $20,000 to change a sign. And I don't know what that would look like, but for you to look into what the parameters would be when you bring this item back.
I think that would be a discussion on kind of legal nonconforming, if you will, allowing that to maintain
Okay.
if it's currently not under current code. So replacing like for like we just.
Okay. Minimum unit sizes. My bigger concern is on like impact on larger families with the 2-bedroom or 3-bedroom. I'm okay with maybe the 1-bedrooms not having a minimum, as well as the studios, but for us to explore the 2 and 3, because again, I don't want to create a situation where families or larger families have a limited supply from future construction. Basement I'm okay with. I, for one, I'm not okay with the pre-application fee. I'm okay with the pre-application itself, but not assigning a fee to it. It might be somebody has a small project, they're submitting something, and then they have to pay $500, and then they decide they're not going to do it, and then they lose $500. I don't think our residents or small businesses should have to pay just to have conversations and look at potentials of a project with our staff. The concierge service, I'm good with all of it. I would like for us to also take into account tenant improvements. And then one of the main things that I hear from small businesses a lot is assistance with permits and the permit process as part of the concierge service. I don't know how we do that with building and safety, but I know that, for example, economic development may be soliciting a business or is trying to help a small business, but there's then needs to be that conversation with planning and building and safety and how I would leave that to you to kind of figure out how that falls into concierge services. And then also looking at PR for pre and post business opening. The EIR contracting, I would like to see that we open up that, we set up parameters for if you are choosing, let's say 3 or 4, that maybe every 1.5 years or 2 years we put out a new RFP to make sure that if there were new companies that wanted to be part of that list, they could apply. I think that's what I have from the list. And then if I may add a couple of other things. So as I think some of the items that Councilmember Garpetian mentioned as his new items are part of that larger accountability that we're talking about internally. And so like establishing timelines for rechecks and so forth. This is something I've actually been bringing up for about 1.5 years now. There has to be some maximum timelines to get appeals back to council and commissions. I hear from residents all the time that, they've been waiting 6, 7 months just to have their case heard when there's an appeal. And I don't think, I think we as a council can make time for it, and the commissions should too, because time is money. And then I'd like for us to start looking at how we can improve the DRB and HPC to prevent slowdowns in project reviews. I know that this was part of the larger bucket that was provided a long while ago, but. And then lastly, I know I raised this during the staff briefing, but the public safety impact and just infrastructure impact. I know there's a lot of large projects coming up for us to review, and I want to make sure that the reports have some sort of impact on public safety and what kind of fees we can apply. That most of the cities that we have around us have this as part of the report and the decision-making process. So I'd like to see that as well. That's all.
If I can recap a couple things here. It looks, based on my count here, everything has a majority with the exception, the only split I have right now is the minimum unit size. With that being said, if there's a council member that would like to study just the studio or 1-bedroom, or 2 council members, if not, we can bring this back and have a broader discussion.
So my argument was for 2 and 3-bedroom units. There shouldn't, just so we don't have that impact on larger families, but being okay with getting rid of minimums for studios and 1-bedroom.
And if I may offer a little bit of input on that.
We wouldn't be making that decision today,
no,
right? You're bringing it back.
I would say if you would only like to study the studio 1-bedroom, and I think that is something from a staff perspective, we do see kind of out of skew on a national perspective. I would not recommend us going very far with studying the 2 and the 3 bedrooms. Other cities have reduced those numbers too low. In Toronto, for example, they put in a requirement for family-size housing, and they were getting 800 square foot, 3-bedroom apartments, and it was basically college kids were moving in. That was not the intent behind that. So I think leaving the 2 and 3 alone would be best. If you would like to study it, studios and 1-bedrooms to be the only place.
If I can ask, what kind of information would you bring us on that?
We would look at national averages, the regional national averages. I said studios usually range between 350 and 450. I think we would probably be more inclined to lean towards a 450 limit, but.
So my sort of thoughts were that I didn't like the impact that it had. That's not really quantifiable. I mean, it's more sort of gut feeling. I mean, I have no objection to bringing us information on it, but what I'm feeling, I'm not sure is going to be affected by what national averages are.
Actually, I do believe there's some information I could bring back to discuss that impact. ULI did a study a few years ago, and they were looking at, how long, based on square footage of units, how long do people stay in the neighborhood? How long do they stay in the building? So if you're looking at things like tenancy, how long somebody's going to remain vested in the community, if you will, that's something we could bring back as information.
Occupancy?
Yes, they have tenure, things of that nature.
When I say occupancy, number of tenants in that unit?
Yeah.
And standards as far as minimum square footage per, are there standards for that in a residence?
There are some numbers, some's dictated by fire, some dictated by police,
I have
or
no
not
problem.
police,
I mean, if
building.
my colleague doesn't feel like I've left him hanging in the breeze on this.
No,
I wouldn't
ahead,
mind,
finish.
I mean, I'd be open to getting some more information.
I mean, getting information is different, but I don't think we should compare us to San Francisco, Seattle, Canada, cities in Canada, and larger cities that they have those dense downtowns. And we have one right now across the street. It was a hotel. They turned it into residential units. It's less than 300 square foot or what have you. But even the 1-bedrooms, newlyweds live in one bedrooms. It's not that because it's a one bedroom, it's only single people live there. I don't want to make it so, it's just about the quality of life. We had one single unit, it was 420 square feet. It was an affordable housing on the first one, Elevate on Broadway, right? It was an affordable housing. When it got to, the person that won that lottery was hesitant to live in that unit because it was so small. So I don't know. I don't mind looking at it, but I'm not, but the report should not be from very large cities all over the Chicago or whatever, all over the nation.
No, we would use
you have to
comparable.
compare the same size cities, similar to Glendale, and see how did that work? How long people live in these 350, 400 square foot units? It's not a very high quality of lifestyle, to be honest with you. But I don't mind, getting a report on it. But
So it seems like we do have consensus on ignoring the 2 and 3 bedrooms, and then you bringing something back for studios and 1 bedrooms, okay?
One more, well, actually 2 more. Mayor, you brought up the maximum timelines for appeals. Is that something the rest of the council members are interested in us bringing back as part of this as well?
Would that be part of, does that coincide with your study, with your reforms here?
I think it is something that is not so complex, not so challenging that we could put it in here. We may unpack it and find it be more difficult, and we'll have to have a broader conversation, but we can start that discussion.
I'm okay with hearing that.
My thought process on that was just people being in queues and waiting to be calendared for a council meeting or a commission,
okay.
which is not fair, so, okay.
I have 2. Are there any other councilors?
oh, I thought you said the appeal period, like 15 days. I thought.
No, I'm talking about
bringing it
like,
back.
people are waiting like 6, 7 months to get on calendar for a council meeting or a commission meeting when
No, I'm okay
everything,
with that.
so create a shorter timeline. Okay,
And then, if I may recommend, regarding the discussion on improving DRB, HPC, I think that might be something that might be best kind of pulled out as a complete, entirely separate item. We could start looking at elements of that and bring that back for discussion if council is interested. Again, I would kind of pull that to the side a bit from this, because that's going to be a much kind of larger ball of yarn to unravel there.
so what I'm interested in that specifically is to prevent slowdowns in project reviews, right? And so this isn't about like an overhaul or whatever, but just starting to look at like what are some things we can do to help prevent that slowdown.
Yeah, and one other thing is, I think, how do I put this in the right words? When the applicants come in with a design of a project, and they want to have, I don't know, a Mediterranean, for example, design, this is what I hear. I'm not saying it's true or not, that they're being pushed into more modern designs, to have a modern design for their house. And there are a couple of them being built in Vertigo Woodlands, and that house has no place on that street. It's, the neighborhood compatibility and design guidelines that we had. I think we need to let them a free hand to design instead of, I'm not saying you're doing it, but I'm saying that's what I'm hearing. I don't know if it's true or not, but some of these smaller lots, modern design homes don't fit in those neighborhoods. So something to consider when we bring this whole issue back.
I would say our staff is not in the business of pushing a particular design aesthetic, if you will. There are situations, depending on context, then obviously we offer that recommendation, or even the DRB itself could. To the prior point, what we could do is essentially do a bit of homework, do a critical analysis, speak with our applicants, identify where some of those pain points may have been, and just start bringing that back for a discussion at a later date. Again, I do think that might be best fit as its own separate topic, but we could start looking into those. And then identify what those weaknesses are, where we can do improvements, make improvements.
Is there a third person that would be willing to support that? Just
Take a
looking
look,
at the-
take a look, sure, of course.
Okay. All right, is there anything else, Mr. Calvert? So I just want to make sure we're clear. The FAR that you brought, just as is what we've agreed on. There's 3 votes for.
For the-
You only had 1 council member that had additional comments to that, and I want to make sure that we're not holding up a process.
No, I think, again, that's not one of those things that we would implement right away. We need to come back with additional information. We also want to demonstrate that this is not going to be something that will be public-facing. Mr. Garcia brought up a good point here, under the parking requirements. It seems I have at least 1, if not 2, that would like to look at parking maximums. Mayor, Councilmember Brotman, Councilmember DeJarno wasn't quite clear if you wanted to look at the parking maximums or not in your comments.
Parking maximum, setting a limit on the number of parking. Is that a realistic consideration?
It's become quite successful in many cities. It kind of prevents the over parking. In some cases, I think Councilmember Brotman brought up the point of one of the newer developments is coming in with a lot of parking. You could take advantage of that through shared parking agreements later on if somebody else is kind of capped out. What I would say to that is it actually lets the market decide. We would not set that maximum so low that we would get into a situation, to Councilmember Garpetian's point, where we're under parking everything. We would need to calibrate. We need to study it. We don't know what that number looks like yet. But we wouldn't set it so low that it would cause that problem.
If you're just gonna bring us information and we're gonna sort of get a better feel for it.
Yes, we're not going to decide anything yet.
I will, I'll agree to look at that.
Question on that? Are you talking about the residential developments or commercial developments?
Could be both. We'll need to look at both.
With the new state laws that's came through and it's coming through, I don't think even parking is an issue anymore, because they're telling you can build 20 units, 30 units with 0 parkings. And now we tell them, I don't know, when you say maximize it, is it you tell them that if you build 20 units, maximum parking that you need to provide is 10? Is that what we're trying to do, or?
I wouldn't say to set it that low. I think it's just identifying, if it's 21 bedroom units that we don't have any more than, 30 spaces, we would look at it from a perspective of unit or bedroom count and identifying the maximum. To your point about the multifamily coming in, that they can come in and build 0, correct. We have not seen that yet. And honestly, I don't think we're going to. The projects that we just have seen recently could have used some of the same state legislation. They did not. And in fact, what we found in a couple of those, that they overparked them. Again, it's just, we're looking at a study on this. We're going to try to figure out what that number would be. And if this is something that, we come back with that information, doesn't seem appetizing and not fit for us, then, we move on from it. We just update that parking chapter just to reflect the state requirements.
Yeah, but there are projects that were approved that are, I don't know, over 40, 45 units, and they have only 32 or 33 parking spaces, not even 1 per unit. So that code is being used. The state law is being used currently. But okay, let's take a look at it. I mean, you know where I stand on parking. I think every unit has to have at least 1 parking spaces. Every family has a car, and by pretending that no one drives and no one has a car, I don't think we're doing justice to the future of the city.
If I might I will mention that the census data shows that 14% of Glendale households do not own a car. So that's just a reality that we face. I know it may not be something you see every day. I don't see it every day, but it is the reality. And a lot of young people don't want to pay for parking,
No, I understand, but that doesn't mean that they're not going to have a car tomorrow. They may not have a car today, but 14% out of 200,000 is not a big number. And some people have 2 or 3 or 5 cars instead of 1. So I understand what you're saying. There's a trend, but that doesn't mean that they don't have a car today. It doesn't mean they don't need one. Maybe they can't afford one, and in the future they buy one. So we need to be ready for it, because, as I said, in the 60s and 70s, these units were built, and now we have an issue with it. And that's where the congestion comes from.
So do you need a motion? Are we clear?
Do you need any more clarification? I don't want to walk away from this where someone says,
I came in with
hey,
16
I made
items.
this comment, and then,
No, I think we clarified everything. The parking and the unit study was the key part. We came in with 16, we'll leave with 18, so more work, but all positive things. So we'll come back in a few months and provide an update on some of these and get additional direction.
If it was, we can go through it one by one again. I'm just.
No. I think you have two very meaty items coming up, so
Thing.
hand it off to our colleagues at this point.
And then the staffing, as part of your report, my hope is that when you bring the staffing, that there's also that larger conversation with GWP and fire and public works. You guys keep promising me, like, we're working on it. Last time, I think yesterday, I talked to GWP again, and I know that you guys have made some movement in that space, but again, let's do it. Cool. Thank you. I appreciate you and all the staff that worked on this. All right. That felt really productive. All right, go on. What's the next item?
Next is City Attorney, Item 2, City Attorney regarding ordinance amending Glendale Municipal Code, Chapter 9.28, relating to camping. A, introduction of ordinance. Mayor Asatrian, we currently have one speaker card that was submitted on this
Okay,
item.
great. We'll take it.
Would you like a report, presentation?
No.
Okay.
Do my colleagues need a report or presentation? I don't think so.
This is on the camping?
Yeah.
Correct.
Not really. no.
Okay. All right. We'll take the speaker.
The speaker is Rick Lemuel.
Welcome, Mr. Lemuel.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council, City staff. I'm here speaking on behalf of the Greater Downtown Glendale Association, and we would like you to be as aggressive as you possibly can, and also be aggressive with budget on supporting some level of officer or code enforcement personnel, because it seems like we're often losing control of the situation. I receive, I would say conservatively, in a volunteer position, 4 to 5 complaints a week that camping on the street is impacting business. Also, because of my prior role, I do not include, when I speak to you, any complaints from the Americana at Brand area. However, I do know that the Glendale Galleria has significant issues, and our police, I try my very best not to bother them as much as what we hear and what we get complained about, because I'm sure they have serious, very busy things to do and not just reply to my texts. But we have a continuing problem that is absolutely starting to improve, but I think we need to be more aggressive, and would also like to request that we support our city attorney in getting together with our new district attorney for the county, in the hopes that we can, when people are breaking the law, we can do a much more aggressive job of having them be accountable for their actions. Thank you very much for the time to speak.
May I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Lemo.
Yes, sir.
So I
Councilmember.
don't think I've ever seen any homeless in the Americana. What's your secret?
Well,
You just roust them? I mean, do
no.
they even consider walking in? Or seriously, do you
Looking-
direct them to our police? Do you call Path and Chief? What do you guys?
Looking back at the past, when I was full-time employed by the Caruso organization, a heavy amount of security makes a huge, huge difference. It's also not terribly comfortable to be there and to camp there unless you happen to be living in one of the apartments that are soundproofed, because we play music until 11 o'clock at night. And I just think it's not an environment that welcomes them. It's a gross inconvenience for the people that are breaking the law, as well as for the merchant or business that's operating. But I only raise the past Caruso relationship because I'm here strictly in a volunteer capacity for the Greater Downtown Glendale Association. Thank you. I hope I answered your question.
Yes, you did.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lemon.
Thank you.
Do any of my colleagues have any questions?
No? No.
Mr. Lemo did make a comment that I'm interested to have an answer for. I see our police chiefs here. Chief said if you can come up, please.
Afternoon, Mayor and Council.
Hi. We are often losing control. Do you feel that way?
I don't feel that we are losing control of anything related to public safety.
Okay, so I know that the city council has made this area a priority for our city and for our residents and for our businesses. I think last time we even discussed about providing additional staffing for the police department and any resources you or our homeless services may need to ensure that we're addressing it. And so I'd like to know both from Mr. Galanian and you where we are with the staffing, additional staffing requests that you were going to place.
I will defer to the CM in regards to additional staffing requests. I've done a report, and the CM and I have talked about it. I think it's under consideration along with a lot of other stuff. I will speak to our staffing in regards to our current allocation. Happy to say that right now we have 11 new police officers in training and 16 in the academy. Once those individuals kind of make their way through that pipeline and come out, we will be fully staffed for our 248 police officers. So tremendous work by staff, because just about 18 months ago, that number was nowhere near that. And that is already paying dividends. To Mr. Lemo's point, that coupled with grants passed, I think you're already starting to see the impacts that's having with homelessness and encampments and things of that nature. But again, I will defer to the CM regarding any additional allocations and the work that we're doing there.
Do we have a timeline of when that staffing request is going to be coming in, Mr.
Mayor
Galanian?
Satrian, to add what Chief Sid has mentioned, obviously, we're fully staffed at the police department currently. He has submitted a proposal. He's correct. It's under my review currently. There are several competing interests, several departments that I need to be cognizant of as far as funding for these positions are concerned, but I'm hoping that it'll come to council with our budget update on December 10th.
December 10th, okay. All right, thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
I'll also use this opportunity to note that I had to schedule a meeting with Essentia several weeks ago. Our Community Services Director, Onik Bulanikian, and Arsena, our homeless coordinator, were present at that meeting. We did go through the items within the contract. I think that it was a very productive meeting, and I'm hoping that within the next month, we will have clear direction from Essentia of what parts of the contract they're going to be able to actually implement and be resources for, and if there are areas that they can't cover, for that to be made very clear to us, because we have a certain expectation from all of our organizations and vendors, and we want to make sure that we're providing proper resources as a city in figuring out this homeless situation. Our numbers are still much lower than any of our surrounding cities, and I want to take this opportunity to also commend staff from Community Services and PD. I think this is also going to be a community effort, and so I know some folks have been messaging me, but as a point of reference, you can also use the My Glendale app. If you see a homeless individual, to submit the location, and I know that our homeless services and PD are working together, not just, I don't like the word aggressive when it comes to this. I would say compassionate care, but also making sure that our streets are safe and welcoming to all. So, thank you to staff. I have no changes to.
Just needs an introduction by one of the council members, Madam Mayor.
Right. Somebody want to make?
On the item number 2.
It's just introduced.
Just introducing the ordinance, so it's been
Yeah.
introduced.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next item.
Next item is item 3, City Attorney regarding ordinance amending Glendale Municipal Code, Chapter 5.20, relating to the sidewalk vendor license. A, introduction of ordinance. B, resolution of appropriation in the amount of $88,882 for off-hours enforcement. Madam Mayor, we have one speaker card for this item at the moment.
Who is it?
The speaker is Rick Lemville.
Welcome back, Mr. Lemmer. You should have just, yeah. Are you coming back for 6 p.m.?
Yes,
Okay, cool.
my family doesn't like hearing from me this much.
All right.
This is probably one of the most important issues that I've been asked to come with you on to City Council. We have some serious issues with the street vendors in particular. First of all, we find that it is a grossly unfair situation. Imagine if you were all property owners and you have people paying rent to you to utilize the property that you provide them. But I made a decision instead to, because you have such great locations and such high traffic, I make a decision instead that I'm going to open up a business. I'm not going to pay any license fees whatsoever. I'm not going to follow basically any of the rules and regulations. And then I'm not going to have to clean up after myself the way most businesses do, because the Greater Downtown Glendale Association is going to clean the mess I make on the street at 4 in the morning. This is what's going on in our city every single day. So much so, and I will tell you that the largest business in our city has made the most complaints. We happen to have what is referred to as the pomegranate merchant, who follows no rules whatsoever, who doesn't pay any fines, who kind of laughs at code enforcement and the police when they go to him. And I don't want to blame him alone, but when their food runs out, or when part of the action takes away their food, another truck brings another one within an hour. This is a significant detriment to business. But more importantly, let's not just pay attention to business, let's pay attention to those that are disabled on the sidewalk, because these people don't care about that either. Instead of having 48 inches for those people to get by, maybe on a good day, there's 24 inches. Maybe for people to cross the street in front of the Glendale Galleria, maybe they're able to see, the traffic patterns and the lights, but not usually. We really need to ensure that the buskers have First Amendment rights but don't block traffic on busy corners, and they're not allowed to use amplified music. We have to ensure that we provide enough budget to the Glendale PD and to code enforcement to work with local providers to direct those in illegal areas to move on. They don't take the law seriously. We have suggested a crime and rights of way task force that we would help the city populate.
Thank you,
And we
Mr.
hope
Lemon.
you would be able to take us up on that. Thank you very much.
Mr. Lemo, I have a question. You said pomegranate what?
The pomegranate juice seller.
Oh, juice.
He's a merchant, but he sells, I think he gives you,
I didn't even
wanna
know
do
they didn't have a
commercial for him.
permit. I actually had some. It was really good.
Are they like street vendors?
Yes.
Or they're part of the,
No, they're street vendors. What we're complaining or concerned about is the inequality that exists between those that are
No,
very
I understand
supportive of
that.
our
I-
city
no.
and those that are not.
I understand, they're on central part of the Galleria? you
They're
said?
on Central, they're also on Brand Boulevard, and they're on both sides of Brand Boulevard, depending on where they get chased away from first. What we're trying to say, very simply, and I know this is not politically correct, if we hassle them here, they'll go someplace else, which is fine. They don't belong in our city if we're not going to because street merchants are very charming in many cities, but we have to have rules and regulations for them to follow.
Okay.
And that's really what we're asking for.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And the ordinance today, Mr. Garcia, or the ordinance in front of us, thank you, Ms. Leno, addresses the major concerns of, public right-of-way and,
Madam Mayor, so we have,
ADA
the laws we have on the books already have addressed a lot of those issues. One of the enforcement challenges we sometimes encounters, as Mr. Lemo noted, recalcitrant vendors who don't want to comply, provide their license, whether this is an additional enforcement tool to allow, not require, allow the staff to impound equipment of the vendors when they're not complying with their requirements, either to have a license, show us their license, or comply with any of the operational requirements.
all right.
So we have an ordinance for introduction and a resolution of appropriation for the additional overtime staffing.
So, Mr. Calvert, can you come up for 1 second? The overtime staffing that we approved, can you acknowledge that if we are approving that overtime, it's only for the items we agreed on and nothing else beyond that?
Correct. The focus would be on the street vetting here.
Okay, so if there were items that some council members brought up, but it didn't have majority and didn't make it to the list, this overtime is not going to be spent on that. So it's going to be spent on street vending and whatever
Correct.
else we found as priorities. Okay, thank you. Right.
Are we introducing this one as well?
Correct. We need introduction of the ordinance, and then we need a motion and second on the resolution of appropriation.
I introduced the ordinance.
And
Mayor, what was that, what were you referring to on requests? So you don't want you don't want the additional staffing to do something else? What was that?
so as way of examples, I think there was like the ban on gas leaf blowers,
I got
all
you.
that
I
stuff
got
that we
you.
went through the other day.
I understand.
And so I just want to make sure that,
I
you know,
understand.
okay. All right.
Did you move the resolution?
Yeah.
Second.
3A.
Well, you introduced it and the resolution.
3A2.
Then I moved 3B.
Okay, the resolution, I'll second that.
Okay.
Resolution of appropriation.
Councilmember Brotman said he's fine with all of it, just as before. Ah, there he is. Okay.
I'm okay with it.
Okay, all right. Roll call.
Council members Brotman,
Yes.
Garpetian,
Yes.
Kasakian, Najarian,
Yes.
Mayor Asadrian.
Yes. And what's next?
Next is item 4, Community Services and Parks regarding City of Glendale year-round hotel program for people experiencing homelessness. A resolution to dispense with competitive bidding and authorize the city manager or a designee to secure hotel rooms as needed at rates cumulatively not to exceed the fiscal year 2024-2025 appropriation for the Glendale Housing Program.
All right, do we need, do my staff, do my colleagues need a report?
No, I don't.
We don't need
I have one question.
just one question.
Yes. I think we approved this budget as part, a couple of weeks ago, right? That $300,000, is that? for-
You approved it for this fiscal year, 24-25 fiscal year.
And on annual basis, historically, what is our budget on an annual basis for this kind of programs?
And 23-24, we had budgeted 80,000. This year, we have increased the budget to 300,000, so there's a huge increase
Okay.
for
All right.
24-25.
Thank you.
All right, is there anything that you wanted to share as just public knowledge as part of your report that just,
I did bring the outreach flyer. I know
Okay, so
Mayor
let's do that.
Asadrian, you had questions on our outreach program and how the public can request outreach services. So we do have this flyer on our website. We have it at all of our community centers. And we have it here at City Hall if anyone is interested. We also wanted to put up the flyer in case the public wants to request outreach. The QR code that's on the flyer will take you directly to the My Glendale app. So you could submit an outreach request through My Glendale app. You could submit a request through our Ascensia. Home Again LA provides outreach for homeless families. And then, of course, the Glendale Police Department's core unit. So we just wanted to share that flyer with the public.
thank you.
Sure.
And just for clarification purposes, if a community member wants to like note, hey, there's a homeless individual in this corner on the space, these are the places that they can contact to help get assistance for that individual.
Yes,
correct?
Mayor Assadurian, they could go through here. Now, if there's somebody that wants to get connected with county outreach resources, we do also have the county flyer on our website, LA Family Housing, and various county outreach hotlines that they can connect with. That's on our website and at our community centers, but for the purposes of today's meeting, we only provided Glendale's outreach program, but we do have county resources available on our website as well.
Okay, awesome, thank you.
I have two things.
If
If I could,
Councilmember
just two requests, and I'm I support the request here. Or something?
Oh, yes. Oh, one thing I'm sorry, I'll go after you, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, go
I
ahead.
just wanted to mention that any references to the Glendale Housing Program on the resolution or the staff report, we would like, it's the Glendale Hotel Program. So we would like to reference that as the Glendale Hotel Program.
Cool.
Okay, just two things, and I mentioned these in the briefing. At the right time, I would like to see a report of who's coming into the hotel program, who's going out and where they're going. I think it would be instructive to us to see, how many people were, after 30 days, were getting into some kind of interim housing, and then, ultimately, hopefully, into some kind of a permanent situation, right?
Sure, Councilmember Brodman, absolutely. We will have data to report back to the council. When we're coming back to council to report on our 2025 PIT, Homeless Point in Time Count data, we'll also be able to report on this specific program. What we've actually done is we've worked with our ISD team, and we have developed a separate software that will be tracking all of the clients that are coming through our Glendale Hotel program. In collaboration with the Glendale Police Department, we're also tracking additional data, where they're coming from, are they experiencing homelessness for the first time, do they need homeless prevention resources, and some other key information that'll help us better serve the unhoused population. So we will be happy to report back to council at a later
Okay.
time with that data.
And the only other comment I'd make is I want to make sure that we are making this program available to people that are on the verge of losing their housing. They're being evicted, and they have no place to go, right? I know that's not the primary purpose here, and I know you said that that's not really what you're looking for, but from time to time, you do accommodate that. But I would, this goes back to kind of reporting on evictions. We don't really know about evictions that are taking place, which is unfortunate. But, evictions are one of the primary, pipelines into being unhoused, and I would like to try to find a way where we can catch some of those people instead of falling off the cliff. We can get them quickly into a hotel and then into something else.
Councilmember Brodman, you're absolutely right about that. The primary purpose of the program is to support our Glendale Police Department outreach team, and for us to reach functional zero at some point when there are unhoused individuals and families who need services. We want to get to them as quickly as possible. We want to get them non-congregate sheltering until we can open up a space at our shelter, or just to provide the wraparound services. But we have actually used the program in some cases for those who are on the verge of becoming homeless, especially with the aging population. We have seen this group kind of become more at risk. So there have been times where we have used a hotel program to help individuals quickly transition back into housing. So it is open to those who are experiencing homelessness again, but I do want to emphasize that the primary goal is to be able to support our outreach teams when they do come across individuals and families that are unhoused, to be able to provide shelter as quickly as possible. So yes, on a case-by-case basis, we do approve those who are at risk.
Yeah, and I want to give kudos to your team. There was a situation a few weeks ago where I was sitting in front of a California Pizza Kitchen, and a guy came up asking for money, and I got into a conversation with him, and he said he was homeless and he was sleeping. He pointed over to where he was sleeping, and I contacted you guys, and you got him into a hotel like within hours.
Yes.
So I thought that was really great. Thank you for that.
Yes, of course. You're welcome.
You should have seen her in the meeting. I was so proud. All right. Are there any, hold on. Are there any callers or?
We
No,
do not
no.
have any callers or cards.
All right, great. Thanks. Sorry, go ahead.
I move 4A.
With the one change to the Glendale Hotel program.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'll second that.
Thank
Alright,
you
roll
so
call.
much.
Council members Brotman,
Yes.
Garpetian,
Yes.
Kasakian, Najarian,
Yes.
Mayor Asatryan.
Yes, and I will note, we had some preliminary discussions with our communications folks this morning. I think it would be worthwhile on these big ticket items for us as a council to take more of a leadership role in communicating our decisions and priorities out. So would love for us to coordinate in the next week to get some messaging out. So, thank you. All right, what do we got?
Next is adjournment.
Okay, move to adjourn.
Second.
We are adjourned.
Is there a closed session?
Yes, we have a closed session. All right, let's roll over. All right, welcome to the November 19th meeting of the Glendale City Council. May we have roll call?
Yes, council members Brotman,
Here.
Garpetian,
Here.
Kasakian, Najarian,
Here.
Mayor Asatryan.
Here. And may we have your report?
The closed session items are the following. Item A, conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, initiation of litigation pursuant to paragraph 4 of subdivision D of Government Code Section 54956.9, one potential case. B, public employment, attorneys. C, conference with real property negotiators, city designated negotiators, Rubik Golanian, John Takhdalian, Onik Bulanikian, Michael J. Garcia, Jillian Van Meiden, Michelle Flynn, Bradley Calvert, and Mark Berry. Property location 440 and 444 West Cypress Street, 1275, 1291 through 1295, and 1295A Los Angeles Street, and 448 Fernando Court. Negotiating parties, CPD Los Angeles LLC. Instructions to the negotiators will concern the price and terms of payment for the acquisition of property. And item D, conference with legal counsel, existing litigation, Panosian versus City of Glendale, LASC case number 23GDCV00932.
Do we anticipate reporting out on any?
Yes, Madam Mayor, we anticipate reporting on items 1B and 1D.
We'll recess the closed session.